So I wanted to highlight some of the best practices, some of the things that are going on, and then I hope to share a case study around Ohio, which is our most, I guess, senior of the trail caucuses, and then we'll go from there. Um, so beginning with just kind of the concept, I think it's important to highlight that to be a successful caucus, you want to make sure that you have bipartisan participation, and you want also to have a balance of senators and representatives. So again, being bicameral, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important. And then, I think ultimately these state elected officials are gathering together because they are committed to trails. They understand how important trails are to the communities of their state, to their constituents, to attracting tourism, to supporting health, to economic benefits. I mean, quality of life across the board. And so this tends to be a great issue for legislators from all different types of districts and backgrounds and perspectives to come together. I thought it'd be good to highlight a few what we're starting to learn and think of as best practices. The Ohio caucus started in March of 2017. And also thinking about other regular engagement tactics, and not forgetting to include those legislative aids. So this was the majority of what I wanted to highlight, but to give you a little bit of perspective using Ohio, this slide just kind of captures what we did in the first year. We are now at 49 members, and the entire legislature in Ohio is 132. So, definitely over these 3 years, we've built membership, and that certainly helps to direct and accomplish some of the goals that we want to see. We had a great kickoff event right on the trail early on, and engaged a lot of legislators and their staffers by having lunch tickets for food trucks. And we had all the different trail constituent groups represented. It was really fun. One of the things we wanted to do is get something out there. So the Year of the Trails resolution that we passed for 2018 was a way for the caucus to sort of form around an idea that was a statement dedicated to the importance of trails. Couple other actions that have happened since then. We have an online trail map that the Department of Natural Resources responded to. It was one of our short-term goals. We also have an annual celebration of the caucus. And there are some of the different ways that we engage represented by this slide. We ask constituents to ask their senators and representatives to join the caucus, so we continue to build membership that way. This just highlights some of the things that the Year of the Trails was talking about, but it was a nice way to get started that was followed by this third item under the near-term goals, which was the new state trail plan that was launched in May of 2019. So I kind of highlight all these things because I think it's important to think about right now that the COVID crisis and also things related to, the Black Lives Matter protests and a lot of the other significant things that are happening at these times, we need to be sensitive to that when we're thinking about the things that can be accomplished over the next year. Certainly, it's important to think about economic stimulus and public health, but we're looking a lot at updating state trail plans and other things that can be done to drive momentum and direct future funding, but realizing that a lot of that funding may be hard to access as we're recovering from the crisis. A couple other items that are highlighted here. These all come from that mission vision goals that I was talking about before. Agency capacity, as I think many of you know, is also really critical at this time, and that may be a defensive move to think about to keep trail programming going. And we're hearing a lot of talk about this economic impact study to help make the case. So that just gives you a flavor for how your caucus might form a platform or agenda. This is an example. I'll share this PowerPoint later of how we tried to get a Department of Trails in our DNR, which currently does not have that section. And then this is a little bit about longer term goals related to additional funding and so forth. So overall, I think you can see a lot of development that's happened in Ohio, and that includes that coalition I mentioned, the Ohio Network, which is designed to further leverage the advocacy across regions and across different interest groups. Again, land trusts, public health, business, local electeds, you name it. And as you start to think more about advocacy, you want to have as many of those groups engaged so that you can be telling those stories and also having a lot of meetings with a lot of different legislators. This just highlights some of the stakeholders that I mentioned before and some of the strategies and tactics that we've been looking at. So I want to wrap up with, and if anybody wants to absorb this while I'm just highlighting some things that we're seeing today. Ohio, I've mentioned 3.5 years in, some great examples of events and other activities and engagement strategies that we've used. Wisconsin and Indiana are relatively new. Indiana actually launched its caucus, it was March 5th, so about a week before the COVID crisis really kicked in for the U.S. And since then, I mentioned we've done a caucus newsletter. At 2:00 today, we're having a caucus summit. And in 2 weeks, we have increased the initial membership, which was 11 as of March 5th when we launched the caucus. We now have 25 members. So a lot of that had to do with starting to reach out around trails being a critical response to COVID-19 and some of the other things that we're seeing. So we're really excited about that summit. Wisconsin, we have had several introductory meetings, and it's been a slow movement to get the caucus going. But we have great leadership. We had a recent state elected officials panel where our caucus co-chair, one of our caucus co-chairs from Wisconsin, spoke about the importance of trails right now in this moment. Very powerful, and there's a link to that presentation, in fact. Ultimately, what we're also seeing is a lot of other states like Georgia, and it includes Minnesota, Michigan, West Virginia, and a number of other states that are exploring a trails caucus. And that's where I come in, and Rails to Trails in general. We are happy to brainstorm with you, provide ideas, any other things that we can do to help you sort of customize what you need to do in your state, and then also how to move forward, and as things evolve, what other tactics, strategies you might use. So thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I'm going to hand it over to Brent Bice from the East Coast Greenway.
Thank you so much, Brian. Greetings, everyone, from Savannah, Georgia. My name is Brent Bice, and I'm the Georgia and South Carolina coordinator for the East Coast Greenway Alliance, a Durham, North Carolina-based nonprofit. I want to talk to you a little bit about some efforts that have already happened from coastal Georgia that will hopefully help us build towards a truly statewide bipartisan legislative trail caucus in Georgia. Pictured here, you can see a brand new segment of multi-use path in the charming southeasternmost city of St. Mary's, Georgia, right at the border with Florida and the launching point for Cumberland Island National Seashore. Pictured is one of St. Mary's City Councilman, Dave Riley, a real champion for multi-use paths, joined with some local advocates for trails and better walking and bicycling in St. Mary's. And this trail they're on locally is called the Tabby Trail, but it is also part of the East Coast Greenway network of trails. For those of you who may not be familiar with the vision, the East Coast Greenway is an envisioned network of rail trails, multi-use paths, and linear parks that will connect communities and cities from the Canadian border in Calais, Maine, all the way to Key West. And of course, that route includes all 6 coastal counties in Georgia. We zoom in and we can see this lightly colored green line, which represents the envisioned route for the Greenway. The good news is that about 1/3 of the East Coast Greenway has been constructed as fully traffic separated multi-use path that is safe for all ages, abilities, and backgrounds to walk, to bike, to skate, and otherwise engage in any kind of non-motorized activity. When we zoom in, though, we see that unfortunately Georgia is in last place. While New Hampshire is technically behind us, they're very quickly going to jump ahead as they begin completing a rail trail that will almost completely make them finished in terms of Greenway development. Whereas Georgia is at the back of the pack, and we don't have a lot on deck in terms of construction as of right now, but we're looking forward to changing that soon. If we really zoom in to see the envisioned route in coastal Georgia, which is connecting the cities of Savannah and St. Mary's, you can see that light green line is the envisioned route where there currently is not multi-use path or rail trail constructed. The darker green lines, more blobs in our case, are those completed sections. And while they're few and far between, they are worth highlighting so you can see what the Greenway can look like in a variety of contexts. Here is a conservation area south of Savannah. The nearby city of Richmond Hill has a multi-use path asphalt as part of their municipal complex. Much further south in the very historic city of Darien, Georgia, we have the Highlander Trail, which is a real gem of the coastal system and is our longest segment of the East Coast Greenway and connects to Fort King George, which is a state historic site, a recreation of the very first British fort in what was then the new colony of Georgia. Further to the south, we feature the Liberty Ships Trail, which is adjacent to US Highway 17. If you know coastal Georgia at all, just ahead in this photo to the right would be the causeway to St. Simon's Island, and over the photographer's shoulder to your right would be the suspension bridge that leads you to Jekyll Island. South of there in Camden County, our southernmost county, we've got the Woodbine Trail, which is a rail trail that goes from the banks of the Satilla River down about 4.5 miles and is really one of the most scenic sections of trail in coastal Georgia, or really in all of Georgia. And then at the southern terminus of Camden County is St. Mary's, where they've been very innovative in creating new trail segments. You can probably tell by the photo, the two-tone concrete. What they did, since they don't have any abandoned rail corridor, was expand the width of their existing sidewalks, which was very creative and low cost. So they turned what was a 5-foot sidewalk into a 10-foot multi-use path that all ages and abilities and a variety of non-motorized users can share. So while we've got some great segments, as you can see, they're really far apart and they're clearly not connected to make a truly regional draw that is serving the needs of tourists or residents for more than a couple of miles at a time. So in recognition of that, and this was prior to me starting with the East Coast Greenway Alliance, but back in 2015, the entire coastal delegation of state lawmakers, led by State Senator William Legan and State Representative Ron Stevens, they passed a resolution that created a joint study committee between the House and the Senate of Georgia's General Assembly to look at the viability, the feasibility, and the potential benefits of developing the East Coast Greenway. At the time, it was called the Coastal Georgia Greenway, so, which you'll see there in the title for the final report. Over a year, this committee held meetings up and down coastal Georgia from Savannah to St. Mary's, engaging with a variety of stakeholder groups from local elected officials to county officials, planners, traffic engineers. You can see here the committee members include all of the bipartisan state lawmakers from coastal Georgia, as well as the various state agencies that would have a hand in helping to develop this trail system. Long story short, what the committee found, unsurprisingly to those of us who are trail advocates, is that the Greenway is a wonderful idea that will be extremely beneficial, not just for the small towns and big cities of coastal Georgia, but also for the region as a whole and even for the state as a whole. From economic development and tourism to health, and addressing health disparities, which are significant in coastal Georgia, they determine that the Greenway is a good thing and that we need to take meaningful steps to develop it sooner than later. As part of their recommendations, they urge the state agencies, in particular the Department of Transportation and the Department of Natural Resources, to leverage any existing and planned projects that they have on deck where the Greenway could be built within the scope of the project. As an example, if the DOT is going to be widening part of US Highway 17, which is the main corridor through the coast, then they should incorporate an 8 or 10-foot multi-use path as part of that project. And I'm happy to say that that's happening as we speak in Camden County with the Laurel Island Highway widening, which is going to include a 10-foot wide concrete multi-use path that will be part of the East Coast Greenway's spine route. So the study committee had tangible impacts, but that's really the only one that we've had so far. So 5 years have gone by since that study committee and its really powerful and compelling report. So this past year, I worked with Senator Legan again to introduce another Senate resolution, 690. which essentially reiterated the findings of that 5-year-old report from the Joint House and Senate Study Committee. This is us presenting to the State Department of Natural Resources Committee for the State Senate. And I'm happy to say that after our presentation and deliberation by the committee, that resolution passed almost unanimously, 43-8. And that is important because it shows that it's much more than just the delegation from the coast who sees value in developing this regionally significant trail in coastal Georgia. Most of the senators from the rest of Georgia recognize that having this completed trail system along the entire length of the coast will be beneficial for all of Georgia from economic development, and it would make us a global trails destination. And we're hoping that these activities and accomplishments from the coast will help build and leverage the growing interest in having a truly statewide trails caucus in Georgia. So with that, I'll put up my contact information. If anybody wants to learn more about the East Coast Greenway in Georgia or about these various efforts, please feel free to reach out to me, brent@greenway.org, and you can certainly learn more about the East Coast Greenway in general at greenway.org. Thank you for your time.
Well, thanks, Brent. I appreciate your presentation on the East Coast Greenway. My name is Elliot Caldwell. I'm the Executive Director of Georgia Bikes. We're the statewide bicycle advocacy organization here in Georgia. I'm based in Athens, but travel the state to different cities, different communities, talking about bicycles and ways communities can be more active around bicycle advocacy. And do a lot of work at the state capitol as well. I mean, the mission of our organization, really, we want to improve conditions for people bicycling in our state. And really, we envision a state where every resident can, go out their front door, ride their bicycle for transportation, recreation, for health, and be safe and comfortable while doing it. So our involvement sort of in the statewide Trails Caucus process, I'm here based in Athens and began discussing this with the folks from Firefly Trail, Tom and John, as well as sort of other stakeholders around trails and bicycling in the state. And what we really looked at and seen is that successful states have sort of buy-in at the state level around sort of trails, not only their planning, but sort of development and actually building them and funding those efforts. And we've been involved at the state level with a number of different stakeholders around building out a statewide trails plan, creating an Office of Outdoor Recreation, and even discussing with various folks about what would it look like to have a statewide trails office, sort of like they do in Florida and some other states that are not that different than Georgia in terms of sort of location. So there's ongoing efforts at the state level relative to sort of how do we, again, fund, plan, build sort of trails in the state. And we thought that a Trails Caucus would be a great sort of, landing point for a lot of constituent concerns, constituent interest in trails, because every resident of our state, they've got a state rep, they've got a state senator. Not every community in the state has a trail organization or a bike or pedestrian advocacy organization located nearby. They may not even have a trail nearby for them to kind of test out and say, oh, I like this about this trail, but I don't like this other thing. So having a statewide Trails Caucus really gives a voice to everybody in the state who has an interest in this issue, because we hear about folks in all corners of the state, rural to urban and everything in between, saying we really want more safe places to ride our bikes. We want more trails. We just don't know how to go about it. And so having a Trails Caucus is one way of doing that. As we have been discussing, again, it's not just planning, but it's also funding and sort of building these trails. It's a big concern we hear at sort of state agencies, for instance, with GDOT. We hear about, rural and small town communities, but also sort of urban communities and sort of inner suburban communities that when they want to do projects, they don't necessarily have the matching funds available that are needed to access sort of federal and state funds when it comes to bicycle projects, including trails and also sort of separated bike facilities and things like that. And they may not be able to do a SPLOST or a T-SPLOST in their city or their region. Not every community, those don't work for every community in our state. And so we realize that there are sort of underserved areas of the state when it comes to places to ride bikes. And again, that includes rural communities and small towns, but that also includes a lot of places in metro areas, urban communities, sort of closer in suburban communities that may not be tied into the trail network that currently exists or that is planned. And so we really see a Trails Caucus as serving a lot of purposes, but certainly one of them is how do we connect state reps and state senators from those sort of more underserved areas or those currently underserved areas with trails and with safe places to ride? How do we connect them to this broader effort in the state to kind of build out a statewide trail network? So again, we really see this as a great way to engage local advocates and constituents, reaching out to their state senators, their state representatives, for them to join this Trails Caucus. We know there are a lot of bicycle and pedestrian oriented and kind of friendly state senators and state reps, and we want to engage them to kind of join this caucus and sort of help break down the silos at the state level. We have GDOT and we have Department of Natural Resources, and we have a lot of different agencies that kind of work in this space, and we want to see this Trails Caucus really help kind of break down the silos and help all those folks work together, because we see a common goal and a common vision of a state that's more bikeable and walkable and rollable and kind of meets transportation and recreation and health needs through non-motorized vehicles, kind of the way that Brent was discussing. But we really need to get on the same page, and that the Trails Caucus will help us do that. So my information is up there. Please reach out anytime. Again, I am based in Athens, but we travel the state. We spend a lot of time in Atlanta at the state capitol and working with state agencies. Feel free to email or go to our website and find out more about the work we are doing. And now I'm going to pass it over to John Cassane from the Firefly Trail. Thanks, y'all.
All right, well, thank you, Elliot. And I'd like to give just a little background on Firefly Trail as a way of introducing how we became kind of drawn into the Legislative Trail Caucus idea or concept. As Tom has already said, Firefly Trail is a planned 39-mile trail between Union Point and Athens, and currently only about 4 miles has been built. But the idea of Firefly Trail has been around for a full 20 years, and it's taken a lot of time, obviously a lot of time and effort to get as far as we've gotten so far. And Firefly Trail Inc., the nonprofit, was established in 2011 to advocate for Firefly Trail and work with local governments and individuals and push along progress with the trail. Athens-Clarke County completed the first 0.8 of a mile segment of Firefly Trail, which is seen here from a downtown Athens heading east. And our organization has focused its attention in recent years on the 2 other counties, Oglethorpe and Greene, which have rather different demographics and somewhat different political leanings from Athens-Clarke County, and which make building support for Firefly Trail somewhat of a challenge. And we have started up a few what we call local action committees in communities in these 2 counties that are working and focusing their attention on limited sections of the future trail. And 2 of our communities in these counties, Maxey's in Oglethorpe and Union Point in Greene County, have benefited from recreational trails program grants from DNR and have built their what we call model mile segments. But that still leaves almost 30 miles in those 2 counties to build. And let me show you just briefly. This is a bit of construction in the Maxey's community that happened last year. And Maxey's has also been kind of the first of our rural areas to benefit from economic development related to Firefly Trail. This is a shot of the Gillen House bed and breakfast that was opened last year in part due to the promise of Firefly Trail. And the historic depot in Maxey's has been bought and is being rehabbed, again, knowing that Firefly Trail is in the near future for that area. But the board is aware, has been aware for some time, that more substantial funding is needed in these two counties, and has been working to seek out sources of that funding. And when Tom and I participated in the webinar that we've talked about already today, that Brian participated in through Rails to Trails Conservancy, we kind of quickly became excited about the idea of a legislative trails caucus in our state that would benefit not only our project, but could really focus on trail networks and bringing about a lot of the potential for trails throughout Georgia. And so we got in touch with the two legislators that Tom mentioned, Spencer Fry from Athens, Trey Rhodes from Greensboro, Greene County, and raised this idea with them. And they were both quite receptive. And in September of last year, we had a fun way of kicking off conversation about the Legislative Trail Caucus idea. We had an e-bike ride along the completed portion of the trail in Athens. This is a shot of some of our group. That's Spencer Fry on the left and Trey Rhodes kind of the front right there. We rode for about an hour and talked about the section of trail and the history of that neighborhood, first of all, and then we followed that up with a luncheon discussion about what a legislative trail caucus could mean for Georgia. Georgia Cycle Sport, a local bike shop, had fitted us out with these e-bikes, which was a new experience for nearly all of us. And it was a very positive day all the way around. And we began talking more with Trey, and especially with Spencer, kind of took the lead in working with us, as well as Brent and Elliot, on some planning for how this caucus could get started in the legislative session last winter and spring. We worked with Spencer's staff in developing this flyer that was presented to the legislators, kind of outlining in a preliminary way a mission statement and goals for a trail caucus. And that was presented to them. It also included some of the benefits of trails, and had a definition of trails not only as a multi-use trail such as Firefly, but also single track trails and blue trails, with the idea that we have a range of trail opportunities in our state that this caucus could promote. And there was quite a bit of discussion that Spencer and Trey reported on, and one brief sort of organizational meeting happened before the emerging pandemic resulted in suspension of the session in early March. So the Trail Caucus remains largely a concept in Georgia, but there at least is the beginnings of it, and we anticipate that it will take off this coming year. And getting the support of Trey and Spencer, who have quite different constituencies, and as was mentioned, Spencer is a Democrat, Trey is a Republican, but they both have put aside their political leanings, at least on this issue, and it's been a good statement, I think, to get this off the ground with them. And returning to the Firefly Trail map, once again, I wanted to also mention that we have had a very good experience this past year putting together an application for a segment of the trail between Union Point and Maxey's, an application to the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program. And Representative Rhodes assisted our efforts in several ways. He attended a key planning meeting that we had in Greene County almost a full year ago now. That was attended by commission members from both Oglethorpe and Greene County and staff, as well as a few mayors from the towns. And it really kind of coalesced this idea of a multi-jurisdictional application to the GOSP grant program. And in subsequent months, Trey helped build support for it, and and talk with some local people and businesses, and it was really key to kind of keeping the enthusiasm for this grant application going. And we don't know yet whether we'll be successful, but we feel that with small trail segments already on the ground in Maxey's and Union Point, that it's a very attractive application to continue building in that southern, what we call the southern segment of Firefly Trail. And I'll conclude with this final shot. This is our board president, Mark Ralston on the right, and Representative Rhodes at the e-bike ride we had a year ago. And we're, all of us here participating in the conference know the benefits of trails and how those benefits can touch virtually all Georgians. And what we've learned with Firefly Trail and our experience to date with these two legislators has really kind of furthered our enthusiasm. So we're confident that some real progress can be made going forward with the Legislative Trail Caucus, and our organization certainly will do all we can to help bring that about. And, I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Thank you very much, John. And I want to thank all our other presenters as well, who will reappear, we hope, in just a moment. Thanks, Brent and Elliot and Brian, as well as John. And now we're going to turn to our Q&A session, which will be handled live on the date of the